Hello, welcome to EPD Pashala Spanish. My name is Nabil Ansari and I teach Spanish in the Center of Spanish, Portuguese, Italian and Latin American Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. We're in the paper entitled Spanish Grammar 1. In this module entitled Hablamos en Presente, we are going to learn the structure and use of regular verbs in Spanish, and by doing so you will be able to narrate current events, express habits, express general facts and truths, express ideas or emotions which are not limited to any fixed time, express current activities. You can talk about near future plans, express actions or situations which started in the past and continues in the present. So these are more or less the things that you can do if you know the present tense of the verbs in Spanish. So the verbs in Spanish is called verbo, and the verbs in plural is called verbos, and they're important for any language as they help us to communicate and form coherent sentences. A verb is an action word. Example, it helps us to explain and communicate the activities we do and identify ourselves. So in Spanish, the structure of any sentence is the same as in English. That is, first comes the subject, then the verb, and then the object. But the verb in Spanish in its original form is called infinitive. Like in English, we say to be, to walk, to see, etc. So these verbs, if we talk about Spanish, we will say that these verbs are in infinitive. That refers to the verbs which is not conjugated. By conjugated, I mean like if I conjugate a verb to walk, so I will say I walk, you walk, she or he walks, etc. So if the verb is to walk, it means it is an infinitive, and if I use the subject with the verb, that is I, you, he, she, etc., then it becomes a conjugation. Now when the verb is used to refer to the actions of a particular people, then the verb needs to be conjugated. Like I mentioned, if I want to say I am, you walk, she sees, etc., so this means that I have conjugated the verb in Spanish or in English. So in Spanish, the infinitive form of the verb always ends with either AR or ER or IR, meaning all the verbs in Spanish can be divided into AR verbs. AR verbs means the verbs which ends in AR. Then ER verbs, meaning the verbs which end in ER. And IR verb, meaning the verbs which end in IR. And it follows a particular system of conjugation. So in Spanish, every verb is conjugated in 6 forms, and the most common way to write the conjugations of these verbs is to make a table with 2 columns and 6 rows. One column has the 6 subject personal pronouns, and the second column has all the corresponding conjugation. Now in order to understand it better, let's see these columns. So as you can see here, the first column is of personal pronoun, that is subject pronoun, and in Spanish the personal pronouns are: for I it is yo, for you it is tú, for él, ella, usted it is for you it is tú, for he it is él, for she it is ella, and for you formal it is you, for we it is nosotros or nosotras, for you all or you plural it is vosotros or vosotras, and for they it is ellos or ellas, and for you all formal it is ustedes. Now you have also learned these personal pronouns in previous module. Now the second part will have the conjugation of the verbs. So before that, let's quickly revise the use of the personal pronouns in Spanish. So when I say yo, meaning I, it means that the person is talking about himself or herself. When we say you, in Spanish it is tú, then it refers to the person, when the person refers to the another person in front. So if I am talking about another person, then I say you, and then the same way he refers to the third man or a boy, and she, that is ella, refers to a third girl or woman, and usted is the formal way of saying you. It is used to address someone directly in a respectful way. It follows the same conjugation as third person, but actually it is used to refer to someone directly and respectfully, like we say आप in Hindi. We in Spanish is nosotros or nosotras. So nosotros, when we say nosotros, it can refer to a group of males, or it can also refer to a group where there are males and females, including ourselves. So we means that I am also included in the group. Same way nosotras, when we say nosotras meaning we, it means that there are only females in the group. Vosotros is when we refer to a group of males or female, or vosotros when we refer to a group of males or male female mixed together, excluding ourselves. That is when we say you all, and this you all vosotros is used when there are males or when there are males and females both. Same way vosotras meaning you all refer vosotros meaning you all when we refer to a group of males or male female mixed, excluding ourselves. So when we say you all, but in this you all there are only males or males and females together. But when we say vosotras, which means also you all, then we are only referring to females. Same way ellos means they, when there are only males or when there are males and females together in the group. But when we say ellas, it means they, but it is used only when there are females. Ustedes is the formal way of saying you all. So vosotros, vosotras was the informal way of saying you all, but ustedes is the formal way of saying you all. It is used to address two people or more directly in a respectful way. It follows the same conjugation as third person, but actually it is used to refer to a group directly and respectfully. Like in Hindi we say hablo. Now the verb in Spanish as in English is conjugated in three forms. That is first person singular, which will be I, and first person plural, which will be we. Same way second person singular, which will be you, and second person plural, which will be you all. And same way third person singular, which will be he, she or you, and third person plural, which will be they or you all. So the subject pronouns here, the subject pronouns are I, you, he, she or you in singular, and in plural it becomes we, you all and they. A Spanish verb has two parts. That is, first part is the stem and the second is ending. So stem is known as raíz and ending is la terminación. Now let's take an example. So if the verb is called tener in its infinitive form, that is, it is not yet conjugated, then if out of then this verb tener has got ending er. As you remember that in Spanish verbs are uh, are having an ending of either ar or er or ir. So this verb tener has got ending er, meaning it ends with er. So ten, that is ten, is the stem, and er is the ending of this particular verb. Now in Spanish, verbs are classified basis two criteria. So one is when there are changes in ending. So change in ending is the first criteria of the classification, and the second criteria is when there are changes in stem of the verb. So we just learned what is stem and what is the ending of the verb. So let's talk about the first criteria. So basis the verb endings, Spanish verbs have been classified into three categories, as I mentioned. So the ending, when the ending changes, it will be either AR verb, that is AR ending verb, ER ending verb, or IR ending verb. AR ending verb means verbs which have AR at the end. ER ending verb means verbs which has ER at the end, and IR ending verb means verbs which have IR at the end. Now this was the first criteria of the verbs classification based on the ending. Now let's talk about the second criteria, that is when there are verbs which changes in the stem. So there are two categories of verbs which changes in the stem, and we have divided it into regular verbs and irregular verbs. So what are regular verbs? The verbs which follow a set or a specific pattern of conjugation, and their stem doesn't undergo any change. And irregular verbs are those verbs which do not follow any specific pattern of conjugation, and their stem undergoes a change apart from their ending. Now we will see these verbs in detail later on, but before we see the regular as well as irregular verb, or before we talk about these conjugations, let's talk a little bit about the tense of the verbs. So verbs as action words provide information about the person who acts or suffers from the action, and when that action occurs. Hence we know when and who did the action, and when we see a conjugated verb in Spanish. But generally speaking, we can tell if the action is related to the past or present or future from the point of view of our speaking time. Meaning, like in English we have past tense, present tense and future tense. So these three main time references have different tenses associated. Past is past tense, present, when we talk about present, it is we talk in present tense, and when we talk about future, then we talk in future tense, or we use future tense. For now, let's start with the present tense, which is related to the present and at times the future as well, the recent future also. In this module, we are going to learn about the regular verbs in the present tense form only, and present tense in Spanish is known as el presente. In this module, we are going to learn about the regular verbs in the present tense. So the present tense is in Spanish is called el presente de indicativo, and regarding the past tense and future tense, you can refer back to the Spanish grammar paper intermediate level. Now we are going to talk about the uses of the present tense. When do we use present tense? We use present tense in the following situations: to talk about what is happening at the moment, to talk about what is a regular or habitual happening, to talk about general facts and truths. So, in order to see in detail the examples of the uses in the present tense, you can refer to the e-text. Now let's see what are the conjugations of regular verbs. Now, to remember the conjugation of a regular verb, it is important to remember the endings of its 6 conjugation. So, in order to explain it in a better way, let's start with the first category of the verbs, which ends in AR. So here are few verbs which ends in AR. So as you can see, the verbs are trabajar, hablar, estudiar, ayudar, andar y bailar. And if you pay attention, and then you must have noticed that all these verbs has got ending that is AR. So trabajar ends with AR and it means to work. Hablar is also ending with AR, which means to speak. Estudiar means to study. Ayudar means to help. Andar means to walk. And bailar means to dance. So if we take the verb hablar and try to separate the stem, we get the following. So hablar has got the stem as HABL, and then the ending of the verb hablar is AR. So as we know, hablar is a regular AR ending verb, and for regular verbs, the stem does not undergo any changes. So we need to focus only on the ending, how these ending of the verb will change in the conjugation, meaning when we are going to use it with different subjects. Now the ending of any a verb is the following as per the subject personal pronouns. That is, of all the regular AR ending verbs, you will have these endings. That is, for yo it will end with o, for tu it will end with as, for él, ella, usted it will end in a, for nosotros, nosotras it will end with amos, for vosotros, vosotras it will end in ais, for ellos, ellas, ustedes it will end in an. Now to understand it better, let's look at the conjugation of the verb hablar formed with the above endings and the stem of the habla. So hablar, which means to speak, will be conjugated as yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla, ella habla, usted habla, nosotros and nosotras hablamos, vosotros and vosotras habláis, ellos and ellas and ustedes hablan. So when I say yo hablo, it means I speak. So hablar means to speak, infinitive form, but when I say yo hablo, it means I speak. When I say tú hablas, it means you speak. When I say él habla, it means he speaks. When I say ella habla, it means she speaks. And when I say usted habla, it means you speak. But usted, remember, is used for saying you speak in a more respectful way. When we say nosotros hablamos or nosotras hablamos, it means we speak. When we say vosotros habláis or vosotras habláis, it means you all or you speak, plural, more than one person. And when we say ellos or ellas hablan, it means they speak. And when we say ustedes hablan, it means you or you all speak in plural, but this you is for telling, speaking in a more respectful way. So the conjugation, the sixth conjugation of the verb hablar is hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habla is hablan. As you saw, the verb conjugation is different for each personal pronoun. So generally, while speaking or writing, the subject personal pronoun is omitted and only the verb conjugation corresponding to that subject personal pronoun is used, which makes it clear in which person we are speaking. Now the reason to do so is that we already have all the information about the person in the verb form. Now let's take an example sentence which adheres to the normal sentence structure. For example, when I say yo hablo español, where yo is the subject, which is I, hablo is the verb, and español is the object. So thus instead of saying yo hablo español, where yo is the subject, if I say hablo español, then it means that hablo español will mean that I speak Spanish. Now we have removed the subject because the hablo can only be used for I. So it is not necessary to say yo hablo español. You can say yo hablo español, or you can simply say hablo español, which will mean the same thing, that is I speak Spanish. Now to form a simple question where the expected reply is either yes or no, you just have to put a question mark in the beginning and at the end of the sentence. The verb is conjugated in the person to whom the question is addressed to. So till now we have learned how do we use the conjugation of the verb while speaking in an affirmative way. The same structure can be used for asking question. For example, if we say hablas español, which means do you speak Spanish, and the reply can be sí, hablo español, or no, no hablo español. So if I say sí, hablo español, it means sí means yes, hablo español means I speak Spanish, and if I say no, no hablo español, it means no, I don't speak Spanish. Now in these subject pronouns, that is I and you or we or you all, it is normally used only to put emphasis on what we are saying. Sometimes the personal pronoun is there to differentiate or make clear to whom is being referred in the third person singular or third person plural. So when we refer to third person, we use his or her name to make the reference clear. So as I explained, the yo form, that is I form, can be used without the subject pronoun, because when I say hablo, it can only be used for I. Same way, when I say hablas, so it can only be used for tú, that is you. So there is no need to say tú. But when I say habla, then you might need, or you can use the subject pronoun when it is not clear of whom you are talking. For example, habla can be either for él, that is he, or ella, that is she, or usted, that is you. So in this case, you can use the subject pronoun. Same way when we say nosotros, nosotras hablamos, so this hablamos can only be used for we. So there is no need to say nosotros or nosotras. You can simply say hablamos. And habláis can only be used for vosotros, that is you all. So there is no need to say vosotros. But when we say hablan, this can be used for either ellos, that is they, or it can also be used for ustedes, that is you all. So here at times we need to specify or mention the subject pronoun. Now let's look at some other regular AR ending verbs. So verbs like trabajar mean to work, estudiar means to study, and explicar means to explain. Now the conjugations can be found in the e-text. Now let's see some examples to see how these verbs are used. So when I say ¿Dónde trabajas? It means where do you work? The reply can be trabajo en un colegio, meaning I work in a school. When I say ¿Estudias español? It means do you study Spanish? Then the reply can be no, no estudio español, meaning no, I don't study Spanish. Or sí, estudio español, which means yes, I study Spanish. Now let's try to have a basic conversation in Spanish using these verbs. So now you are going to listen to a conversation where these verbs are used. Hola, me llamo Juan. ¿Y tú?
Hola, Juan, soy Rohit.
¿Hablas español?
Sí, hablo un poco de español.
¿Estudias o trabajas?
Yo trabajo en un colegio, pero también estudio español en una academia. ¿Y tú?
Yo estudio matemáticas en la universidad. Encantado de conocerte, Rohit.
Igualmente.
The second category is of ER ending verbs, that is, verbs that ends with ER. So in this, the conjugation of will be O, S, A, hemos, eis, en. As you can see here, the ER ending verb regular will have these endings when they are conjugated. So let's take an example. The verb comer, which means to eat, will be conjugated as como, comes, come, comemos, coméis, comen. So if I say yo como, it means I eat. Tu comes means you eat. Él come means he eats. Ella come means she eats. Y usted come means you eat. Nosotros, nosotras comemos means we eat. Vosotros, vosotras coméis means you all eat. And ellos, ellas, ustedes comen means they or you all eat. For example, ¿qué comes? So, what do you eat? Or what are you eating? And the person can reply, for example, como chocolate, which means I eat chocolate or I am eating chocolate. Now remember that in Spanish, the simple present is highly used and in many occasions take uses from the present continuous. Thus, we use the present tense in Spanish when in English we use the present continuous. Like I mentioned, if I say como chocolate, it can mean I eat chocolate or I am eating chocolate. Now let's look at some more verbs in this category. They are aprender, which means to learn, leer, which means to read, and beber, which means to drink. So these verbs also will follow the same pattern like we have seen in the conjugation of the verb comer. For having a look to these conjugations of these verbs, you can refer back to the e-text. Now we just see one example with the verb aprender, meaning to learn. For example, if I say ¿Qué idiomas aprendes? Meaning which language or what language are you learning? And then if I reply aprendo español y alemán, it means I'm learning Spanish and German. So the third category of the verbs are the verbs that end in IR. So in this category we have some verbs mentioned here which are vivir, abrir, escribir, sufrir. So these verbs mentioned, as you can see, are ending with IR. So the IR ending verb, the endings of IR ending verbs are the following. That is, the verbs that ends in IR will end with O, S, A, hemos, is, en, as you can see in the table. Now let's take one example, that is vivir, the verb which ends in ir, meaning to live. So it will be conjugated as vivo, vives, vive, vivimos, vivis, viven. So vivo means I live, vives you live, vive can mean he lives, she or you live, vivimos means we live, vivis means you all live or you live, and viven can mean they live or you all live. For example, ¿Dónde vives? Meaning where do you live? And reply, vivo en Mumbai, meaning I live in Mumbai. Now let's see some more verbs in this category. The verbs are escribir, meaning to write, abrir means to open, and sufrir means to suffer. One more example with the ir ending verb. So if I say ¿Qué escribes? So escribes is the conjugation of the vosotros form, which means what are you all writing? And reply can be escribimos un informe, meaning we are writing a report. Now the only way to remember the conjugation is by learning the endings that correspond to each subject pronoun, and also by learning the verbs, and by knowing which verbs are regular and which verbs are irregular in nature. So just to mention few more verbs which are regular in AR, so verbs like alquilar means to rent, entrar means to enter, necesitar means to need, amar means to love, enviar is to send, and olvidar means to forget. So these verbs that I've just mentioned the list, they are in infinitive form, that is you will have to conjugate it according to the subject. That means if you want to say I and then the verb, then you have to conjugate in the you form, and if you want to be if I want to say you, then you have to conjugate the to form of the verb for its use. So let's see a few verbs which ends in er. Regular verbs in er ending are aprender, meaning to live, creer, meaning to believe, beber, meaning to drink, and there are more which you can learn later on. And the ir ending verb, for example, beber, ir ending verbs, for example, abrir, which means to open, descubrir, which means to discover, permitir, which means to permit, admitir, which means to admit. And apart from these few verbs which ended in ar, er and ir, there are a lot of other regular verbs. So all these verbs can be seen in the e-text. So it is important that you refer to the e-text for seeing more explanations, for having a look to more examples of the verbs conjugated, and also for seeing more conjugations of the verbs or ending in ar, er and ir. Apart from that, the e-text will also have exercises for you so that you can understand it better, and also the links which will take you to other websites where you can learn more about the present tense, that is present tense of the regular verbs. Thank you.